"What the hell are you doing in my house?" I screamed with all the strength my lungs could muster. My heart was beating so hard I thought it might explode in my chest. Before me, kneeling near the door of my own house, were my son Daniel and his wife Jessica with tools in their hands trying to force the lock. A huge moving truck was parked right in front of my garden. The back door was open with some of my furniture already loaded inside. "Dad, were you not supposed to be traveling for 2 weeks?" Daniel went completely pale as if he had seen a ghost. The tools fell from his hands with a metallic crash that echoed in the silence of that afternoon. "Dad, we were just—" Jessica stammered. Her eyes shifted nervously between the truck and me, looking desperately for some credible excuse. "But let me tell you how I got to this moment. Let me tell you how a simple change of plans turned into the most painful revelation of my life. My name is Richard Miller. I am 67 years old, and I have been a widower for 5 years. My wife Emily was the love of my life for 42 years of marriage. When she passed away, I thought I would never feel that kind of deep, tearing pain again. I was wrong because the pain I felt that afternoon looking at my only son trying to rob me was different. It was a betrayal that cut deeper than anything else. That morning had started like any other. I got up early at 6 o'clock on the dot as always. I made my coffee and checked my suitcase for the 3rd time. I had planned this trip for months. My younger sister, who lives in Florida, had insisted I come visit her. "Richard, you need to get out of that house. You need to distract yourself. Do something different." She told me on the phone every week, and she was right. Since Emily died, I had barely left the house. This house we built together, where we raised Daniel, where we celebrated birthdays and Christmases, where we lived a whole life. Every corner held a memory. Every room told a story. The taxi arrived promptly at 8 a.m. I took one last look at my house, locked the door, and put the keys in my pocket. Daniel knew I was going on a trip. We had talked about the trip 2 weeks earlier. He had even come to visit me the day before to say goodbye and wish me a good trip. Now I understand that visit had a completely different purpose. The international airport in Chicago was crowded as always. I checked in, went through security, and sat in the waiting room with my favorite book. My flight was scheduled for 11 a.m. But at 10:30, a voice announced over the speakers that our flight had been canceled due to technical problems with the aircraft. They offered to reschedule it for the next day, but something inside me simply said, "Go home." I cannot explain exactly what it was. Maybe a father's intuition. Maybe the instinct of a man who has lived long enough to sense when something is not right. But I decided not to wait. I took my suitcase, left the airport, and called another taxi to return home. The ride back took 40 minutes. I looked out the window, watching the familiar streets of my city pass by, thinking that maybe I could try to take the flight the next day, or maybe it was a sign that I should not travel at all. Emily always said I was very superstitious, but she also believed in signs from destiny. When the taxi turned onto my street, something immediately caught my attention. There was a large truck parked right in front of my house. It was one of those moving trucks you rent by the day. My first reaction was to think that maybe a neighbor was moving, but as I got closer, my stomach turned. The truck was parked exactly in front of my driveway, and the back door was open. I paid the driver and got out of the car with my suitcase, feeling every step way heavier. My legs were trembling slightly. Something was terribly wrong. I could feel it in every fiber of my being. I walked slowly up the driveway, and that was when I saw them. My son Daniel, my only son. The boy I raised, the boy I fed, the boy I held when he had nightmares. He was kneeling in front of my door with a tool in his hand, and beside him his wife Jessica holding a screwdriver. Both were completely focused on forcing the lock of my house. For a second my mind could not process what I was seeing. I simply stood there, paralyzed, observing a scene that seemed taken from a nightmare. Behind them, inside the truck, I could see some of my furniture. I recognized my old side table, the one I inherited from my father. I recognized the dining room chairs that Emily and I bought on our 10th anniversary. That was when I shouted, "What the hell are you doing in my house?" Daniel dropped the tools and stood up so fast he almost lost his balance. His face changed from shock to panic in a matter of seconds. Jessica froze with the screwdriver still in her hand, her mouth opening and closing without making any sound. "Dad, were you not supposed to be traveling for 2 weeks?" Daniel stammered, and I could see sweat forming on his forehead even though it was not hot. "My flight was canceled," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of shock, disbelief and rage that was beginning to boil inside me. But that does not answer my question. What the hell are you doing trying to break into my house? Dad, we just wanted to. Jessica tried to speak, but the words got stuck in her throat. Just wanted to, what? My voice went up an octave. Just wanted to break in and steal? Just wanted to take my things while I was away? I looked at the truck again more carefully. This time it was not just my furniture. I could see boxes, bags, and objects wrapped in blankets. How long had they been planning this? How long had they been waiting for me to leave so they could empty my house? It is not what you think, Dad. Daniel finally found his voice, although it sounded weak and pathetic. Can we explain? Then explain, I said, crossing my arms over my chest, trying to control the shaking running through my entire body. Explain to me why my own son is trying to force entry into my house. Explain to me why there is a moving truck full of my things. Explain to me why I feel like my heart is breaking into 1,000 pieces in this very moment. Daniel looked at Jessica, and in that exchange of glances I could see everything I needed to know. They had planned this. It was not an impulse. It was not a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate and calculated plan waiting for the perfect moment to execute. That let me explain. Daniel took a step toward me, but instinctively I stepped back. That gesture, that small movement of rejection seemed to hurt him more than any word. Things have been tough for us lately, he said. Tough? I repeated, my voice loaded with disbelief. And that gives you the right to rob me? We are not robbing you. Jessica finally found her voice, although it sounded defensive, almost aggressive. We are family. We thought you could help us. Help? I let out a bitter laugh that I did not even recognize as mine. Help by emptying my house while I am away without even asking me, without my permission? I walked over to the truck. I needed to see with my own eyes what else they had taken. With every step toward that vehicle, I felt like I was walking toward my own execution. I walked up the ramp and started inspecting the contents. My heart sank with every object I recognized. There was the china set Emily gave me on our 25th anniversary. The antique lamps we bought together in that thrift district 30 years ago. The paintings that hung in the living room, including the one my mother painted before she died. Books, ornaments, even the old radio that belonged to my father. How much? I asked without turning to look at them. My voice was barely a whisper. How much did you think you would get selling my entire life? Dad, please. Daniel's voice sounded broken behind me. I turned to face them, and the tears I had been holding back began to roll down my face. I have a very simple question, Daniel. Just one question, and I want the truth. Is this the first time? The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel could not look me in the eyes. Jessica was biting her lower lip, staring at the ground. Answer me, I demanded, my voice trembling. Is this the first time you have entered my house without my permission? Jessica started, but Daniel interrupted her. No, he finally admitted, and with that single word I felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. We have been here before, when you went to the store, when you visited Frank, when you went to your doctor appointments. I leaned against the side of the truck. I needed something to hold me up because my legs were threatening to give way. How many times? I asked. I do not know, Dad. Several times in the last 3 months? 3 months. For 3 months, I had been living in my house, feeling safe, feeling at home, while my own son came and went like a thief. All those times I felt something was out of place. All those moments I thought I was getting forgetful, imagining I had left an object in a different place. It had not been my imagination. It had been real. What did you take? I asked, although I was not sure if I wanted to know the answer. Before today, what other things did you take from here? Jessica and Daniel exchanged another look, that silent communication of couples who have shared secrets. Small things, Jessica murmured. Things we thought you would not notice immediately. Like what? I insisted, feeling the rage bubbling again in my chest. Some jewelry, Daniel admitted, his voice barely audible. Some silver candlesticks. Some old books we thought would have value. Every word was like a direct blow to my heart. Emily's jewelry, I whispered. The pearl earrings she left me before she died. The necklace she wore at our wedding. I thought I had lost them. I searched the whole house for weeks. We needed them, Dad, Daniel tried to justify. We had debts. We had to pay. You could have asked me for help. I exploded, my voice echoing down the street. I am your father, Daniel. If you needed money, if you had problems, you could have told me. But instead you decided to steal from me. You decided to betray my trust in the worst way possible. We knew you did not have much money, Jessica intervened, and there was something in her tone that made me look at her more closely. You always say your pension barely covers the basics, that you have to watch every dollar. And that gives you the right to decide for me? I shouted. Does that give you the right to enter my house like thieves and take whatever you want? I got down from the truck and walked to the door of my house. I needed to go inside. I needed to see what else had been violated, what else had been touched by hands I thought loved me. I took my keys with trembling hands and opened the door. The inside of my house looked normal at first glance. But when you look carefully, when you know every corner of your home, you can see the absences. I could see the empty spaces where my things used to be. The shelf where I kept my grandmother's crystal figurine collection was empty. The cabinet where Emily kept her antique watch collection had its doors open and the shelves bare. I walked toward my bedroom like a man in a trance. Daniel and Jessica followed me at a distance, not daring to get too close. I opened the drawer of my dresser, the drawer where I kept my most precious treasures. It was practically empty. The locket, I said, my voice sounding hollow and dead. The gold locket Emily gave me on our last anniversary with photos of us when we were young. Where is it? Silence. Where is it? I shouted, turning toward them with a fury I had never felt before. We sold it, Jessica admitted in a low voice. 2 weeks ago. We needed to pay the rent or we were going to be evicted. I felt like they had ripped my heart out of my chest. That locket was the most precious thing I had. It was the last gift from Emily, the last physical piece of our love I could hold in my hands. And they had sold it. They had sold it as if it were just any object without value, without importance. How much? I asked, my voice trembling with contained rage. How much did you get for it? $200, Daniel whispered. $200. They sold 42 years of marriage, of memories of love, for $200 miserable dollars. I sat on the edge of my bed because if I did not, I knew I would collapse completely. Tears were falling freely now, and I did not try to stop them. Daniel approached, tried to put his hand on my shoulder, but I pulled away violently. Do not touch me, I said with an icy voice. Do not you dare touch me. Dad, I am so sorry, Daniel sobbed. We did not want it to come to this. We thought if you were gone for 2 weeks, we could take enough things to solve our problems and you would never have to know. And then what, Daniel? I asked, looking him directly in the eyes. Then what? When I returned from my trip and noticed my house was empty, what would you tell me? That there was a robbery? You would lie to my face while I cried over the loss of everything I loved. He did not answer because there was no answer that could justify what they had done. Who else did you sell my things to? I continued. I needed to know everything. I needed to know the full magnitude of this betrayal. Where are Emily's jewels, the watches, the crystal collection from my grandmother? There is a pawn shop on 7th Street, Jessica spoke, her voice small. That is where we took most of the things. Some we sold online in those buy and sell groups. And the money? I asked. On what? You spent the money you got selling my memories? We had debts, Daniel began to explain. The credit card was maxed out. We owed 3 months of rent. The car was about to be repossessed. We had collectors calling every day threatening to sue us. And it never occurred to you to ask me for help? I repeated, feeling disbelief mixing with pain. It never occurred to you to come to me, your father, and tell me the truth? Daniel ran his hands over his face, and I could see he was crying too. But his tears no longer moved me like they used to. I could no longer feel compassion for someone who had violated my trust in such a deep and deliberate way. We were ashamed, he finally admitted. Ashamed to admit we had failed, that we could not handle our own finances, that we were drowning in debt. So you preferred to become thieves? I said bitterly. You preferred to steal from a 67-year-old widower who lives alone on his pension? That was the best solution you could come up with? You are not just an old man. Jessica intervened, and there was something in her tone that made me look at her more closely. You own this house, a big house in a good neighborhood. You are worth a lot more than you think, Richard. Something in the way she said this froze my blood. What do you mean by that? Jessica looked at Daniel, seeking permission or support. He shook his head slightly, but she seemed to ignore him. This house is worth at least $300,000, Jessica said, her words falling like stones in the silence of the room. Probably more. And you live here alone in this huge house with all these empty rooms while we can barely pay for a 1-bedroom apartment in the worst neighborhood in the city. There was the full truth finally exposed. It was not just about debts. It was about resentment. It was about greed. So you thought I did not deserve to live in my own house? I said slowly, processing the magnitude of what I was hearing. You thought I had too much and you too little. It is not fair, Jessica raised her voice, all pretense of regret disappearing from her face. We work 60 hours a week and we can barely survive while you sit here alone in this mansion. This is not a mansion, I replied with a trembling voice. It is the home Emily and I built with 40 years of hard work. It is the house we paid for with every dollar we earned, sacrificing vacations, luxuries, everything you can imagine. This house is full of memories of a lifetime. Memories do not pay the bills, Jessica replied coldly. Jessica, shut up, Daniel finally exploded. Shut your mouth for once. But it was already too late. She had already said too much. The complete plan was now exposed before me in all its horrible clarity. They did not just want to steal my belongings. They wanted to steal my home, the only place in the world where I felt safe, where I could still feel Emily's presence. Get out, I said with a quiet but firm voice. Get out of my house right now. Dad, please let me explain, Daniel tried to approach again. There is nothing to explain, I interrupted him. I want you out of my house immediately, and I want you to return everything that is in that truck. Now. We cannot do that now, Jessica said coldly. Some of those things we already sold. They do not exist anymore. Then you are going to pay me for them, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. You are going to pay me every cent of the value of everything you stole, or I am going to call the police. You are going to call the police on your own son? Jessica laughed. Do not be ridiculous. You are too weak to do that. Test me, I looked her directly in the eyes, and something in my expression must have scared her because she took a step back. Dad, please, Daniel was sobbing openly. We do not want it to end like this. We are family. Family does not steal from each other, I replied, feeling every word tear me apart inside. Family does not conspire to take everything from one of their own. What you did is not what family does. It is what strangers do, what criminals do. I took my cell phone out of my pocket with shaking hands. Daniel saw the gesture and went even paler. Who are you going to call? He asked with a fearful voice. First, I am going to call Frank, I said, referring to my neighbor and best friend. He is a witness. I need someone else to be here and see what you have done. Then I am going to call a locksmith because I am going to change all the locks in this house today. And then I am going to call my lawyer. Dad, you cannot do this, Daniel pleaded. You are going to ruin us. If you call the police, I will have a record. I will not be able to get a job. You are going to destroy us. You destroyed yourselves, I replied, dialing Frank's number. I did nothing except be foolish enough to trust my own son. The phone rang twice before Frank answered. Richard, I thought you would be on the plane. Frank, I need you to come to my house immediately, I said, my voice breaking slightly. Something has happened. I need a witness. I am on my way, he replied without asking questions, and I could hear the sound of a door closing on the other end of the line. Frank lived 3 houses down. He would be here in minutes. I hung up the phone and looked at Daniel and Jessica. You have 2 options. You can stay here and wait for Frank to arrive, and then we call the police together. Or you can start returning everything that is in that truck right now. And maybe, just maybe, I will consider not pressing charges. That is blackmail, Jessica spat the words. I did not correct her. It is justice. It is giving you a chance you do not deserve. A chance I never had when you decided to turn my home into your personal store. Daniel looked at the truck parked outside, then looked at me, and finally looked at Jessica. I could see the conflict on his face, the internal battle between the son he once was and the man he had become. Okay, Daniel finally conceded, his voice barely a defeated whisper. We will return everything. What? Jessica looked at him with disbelief. Daniel, you cannot be serious. Enough, Jessica. Daniel ran his hands over his face, looking exhausted and defeated. This has gone too far, much further than it should have gone. I cannot believe you are giving up like this. Jessica looked at him with contempt. I knew you were weak, but this— I am not weak, Daniel interrupted her, his voice taking a tone I had never heard before. I am a thief. I am someone who betrayed his own father. That is not being strong, Jessica. That is being a coward. For the first time since I arrived, I saw some genuine regret in my son's eyes. But it was too late. The damage was done. The trust was broken, and I was not sure if it could ever be repaired. Start taking things out of the truck, I ordered, crossing my arms. Every last object. Daniel nodded and walked out of the house. Jessica followed him, but not without giving me a look full of pure resentment. I stayed in my bedroom staring at the empty drawer where my most precious treasures used to be, feeling a void in my chest that I knew no returned object could fill. I heard hurried footsteps outside, and then Frank's familiar voice. "Richard, where are you?" "Here in my bedroom," I shouted. Frank appeared in the doorway, breathless from running. He was a man my age, 65 years old, with short gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He had been my neighbor for 20 years and my best friend for 15. "What happened?" he asked. And then, "My God, is that Daniel out there?" His eyes went wide with surprise, seeing my son and his wife unloading furniture from the truck. "What is going on?" I told him everything. Every painful detail. Every devastating confession. Frank listened in silence, his expression changing from surprise to disbelief and finally to indignation. "That ungrateful bastard," he growled when I finished. "That miserable wretch, after everything you have done for him. I do not know what to do, Frank," I admitted, feeling the tears threatening to return. "He is my son, my only son. How can I turn him in? How can I call the police and ruin his life? He ruined his own life." Frank put his hand on my shoulder. "And he almost ruined yours too, Richard. What they did is serious. It is not just theft. It is premeditated. It is systematic. They have been entering your house for months." "I know," I whispered. "I know all that, but he is still my son." "And you are still his father?" Frank replied firmly. "A father who deserves respect, love, and honesty. Not betrayal, not theft, not manipulation." We went out together and headed to the front of the house. Daniel and Jessica were unloading the furniture with slow, resentful movements. They had already returned several pieces, but the truck was still half full. "How much is left?" I asked. "Quite a bit," Daniel replied, without looking me in the eyes. "It took us all morning to load." "So it will take you all afternoon to unload?" I said without a trace of sympathy. "I want everything back in its exact place. Every piece of furniture, every box, every object." Frank stayed with me, a silent and supportive presence. We watched as Daniel and Jessica worked, sweating under the afternoon sun. Neighbors began to come out, curious about the truck and the unusual activity. I could see the looks, the whispered conversations, the speculation. Mrs. Garcia from next door approached cautiously. "Richard, is everything okay? I thought you were traveling." "The trip was canceled," I replied briefly, not wanting to go into details. "Oh, what a shame. Well, if you need anything." She left the offer floating in the air before walking away, clearly sensing there was more to the story, but not daring to ask directly. 2 hours passed. The sun was beginning to set on the horizon when the truck finally emptied. I went into the house to inspect with Frank, following closely behind. The furniture was back, but everything looked different. It was no longer my safe sanctuary. Now it was a place that had been violated, invaded, desecrated. "Many things are still missing," I said, looking at the empty spaces that still remained. "The jewelry, the watches, the locket, the crystal collection. We sold them," Daniel admitted, entering behind us. "We cannot return them because we do not have them anymore." "Then you are going to give me a list," I said with a firm voice. "A complete list of everything you sold. Where you sold it, when and for how much. And you are going to pay me the real value of every object, not the misery you probably got at the pawn shop." "We do not have that money," Jessica protested. "We told you we are bankrupt." "Then you will get the money," I replied coldly. "You will get extra jobs, you will do whatever is necessary. But you will pay me every cent." "And if we cannot?" Jessica challenged me. "Then I will press charges," I said simply. "I have a witness now," I pointed to Frank. "I have evidence of attempted burglary. I have your confession recorded." I held up my cell phone and watched as both of them went pale when they realized I had been recording the entire conversation since Frank arrived. "That is a trap," Jessica accused. No, Frank intervened with an icy voice. "That is intelligence. It is protecting yourself from people who clearly have no scruples." Daniel slumped onto the sofa, looking completely defeated. "How much time do we have?" "You have a month," I decided in the moment. 1 month to get the money and return the value of everything you stole, or I will go to the police with everything I have." 1 month is not enough," Jessica protested. "The debts we have total more than $15,000, and that is without counting what we owe you." "That is not my problem," I said, and every word hurt because I knew I was closing a door possibly forever. "You had 3 months to rob me. You have a month to compensate me. You are cruel, Jessica spat the words. I did not correct her. I am just I, replied. Something you clearly do not understand. I took my phone again and dialed another number. This time it was the locksmith, John Smith, whom I had used before when I lost my keys a few years ago. Hello, this is Richard Miller. I need to change all the locks in my house. All of them. Can you come today? It is urgent. The locksmith said he could be there in an hour. I hung up and looked at Daniel and Jessica. You have an hour before the locksmith arrives, I said. After that you will never be able to enter this house again without my explicit permission. Dad, please, Daniel stood up, approaching me with hands outstretched in supplication. Do not do this. I am still your son. A son who robbed me, I replied, feeling my heart break with every word. A son who conspired to take my home from me. A son who sold my deceased wife's last gift for $200 miserable. I was desperate, Daniel sobbed. I did not know what else to do. You could have asked me for help, I repeated for the umpteenth time. Could you have come to me with the truth? Yes, I do not have much money, but I would have sold some things myself. I would have gotten a loan. I would have done something, but you took that option away from me. You took away my right to decide about my own life, about my own belongings. I am sorry, Dad. Daniel was weeping openly now. I am so sorry. I do not know what I was thinking. You were thinking about yourself, I said with sadness. Only about yourself. Frank took me gently by the arm. Richard, why do you not sit down? You have had a terrible day. I sat down suddenly feeling exhausted. All the weight of the day, of the shock, of the betrayal. It fell on me like a giant wave. I sat on my favorite sofa, the one Emily and I had bought together so many years ago, and closed my eyes. I heard Frank talking to Daniel and Jessica in a low but firm voice, making it clear he would stay there until they left. I heard the sound of traffic outside, the birds singing in the garden trees, all those everyday sounds that suddenly seemed to belong to another life, to another world where my son was not a thief. When I opened my eyes, the locksmith had already arrived. He was a middle-aged man named John who had worked on my house before. He greeted me with a kind smile that faded when he saw my expression and the tense atmosphere in the room. Mr. Richard, you said it was urgent, he commented, looking cautiously at Daniel and Jessica, who were sitting in silence on the other side of the room. Yes, I need you to change all the locks, I confirmed, getting up with effort. The front door, the back door, the garage door, all of them. All of them? John asked, surprised. That will cost around $400 with labor. It does not matter, I said without hesitating. Do it. I saw Daniel flinch at the mention of money. $400 I would have to spend, because I could no longer trust my own son. $400 to feel safe in my own home. John started working on the front door. The sound of his tools filled the uncomfortable silence that had settled in the house. Frank made coffee in the kitchen without asking permission, and brought me a cup with 2 teaspoons of sugar, exactly how I liked it. Drink, he ordered gently. You have had a tremendous shock. I took the cup with shaking hands and drank. The hot liquid comforted me a little, although nothing could really warm the cold I felt in my heart. Daniel approached again, moving with the caution of someone approaching a wounded animal. Dad, about the power of attorney, Jessica mentioned. I will revoke it tomorrow. I interrupted him before he could continue. I will go to my lawyer and make sure you do not have any kind of legal authority over my affairs. None. Dad, please, he tried to explain. It was not my intention to misuse that. It was Jessica who suggested we could. Do not blame your wife, I cut him off again. You made the decision. You entered my house. You took my things. You sold your mother's locket. Those were your decisions, Daniel. Yours. But she pressured me, he insisted. She said you were selfish, that you had too much while we suffered. She convinced me we were doing the right thing. And you believed her? I asked with disbelief. Did you really believe stealing from your widowed father was the right thing? Daniel did not answer, but his silence was answer enough. Jessica stood up abruptly. I am not going to stay here listening to how I get blamed for everything. Daniel is an adult. He made his own decisions. You are right, I agreed, surprising her. He is an adult. An adult who made terrible decisions. But you encouraged him. You manipulated him. You pushed him to betray his own father. I did not manipulate him, Jessica protested. I only opened his eyes to reality. The reality that his father lives like a king while his son can barely pay rent. Like a king, I repeated, feeling the rage bubbling again in my chest. living like a king. I cook my own meals because I cannot afford to eat out. I wear the same clothes for years because I cannot buy new ones. I clip coupons and wait for sales to buy groceries. Is that living like a king? You have a $300,000 house, Jessica replied. A house I paid for over 30 years with the sweat of my brow, and my wife's, I replied with a trembling voice. A house I do not plan to sell or mortgage because it is the only thing I have left of my life with Emily. It is my home, my sanctuary, my refuge. It is a wasted investment, Jessica said coldly. For you, maybe, I said. For me, it is my life. John finished with the first lock and started on the back door. Every sound of his work was like a nail in the coffin. Every new lock was another barrier between us. What happens now? Daniel asked with a small voice. Are you simply going to cut us out of your life? I do not know, I admitted honestly. I need time. I need space. I need to process all of this. Time until when? He insisted. A week? A month? A year? I do not know, Daniel, I repeated, feeling the weariness down to my bones. I do not have the answers right now. I just know I cannot look at you without feeling this betrayal eating me up inside. We are your family, he said desperately. And you treated me worse than a stranger, I replied. You treated me like a target, like a source of easy money, not like a father, not like a person. Frank reappeared with more coffee. This time he also brought me water. Richard, do you want them to leave? I can ask them to wait outside while the locksmith finishes. I looked at Daniel and Jessica. My son looked destroyed with red and swollen eyes from crying so much. Jessica looked resentful but defeated, knowing she had lost this battle. Part of me wanted to kick them out immediately, never see them again. But another part, the part that was still a father despite everything, wanted to hug him and tell him everything would be okay. But I could not do that. Not yet. Maybe never. They can stay until the locksmith finishes, I decided. But afterwards I want them to leave and not come back without calling first. If you show up here unannounced, I will call the police. You would call the police on your own son? Daniel asked with disbelief. After today, I do not know what you are capable of, I replied with brutal honesty. So yes, I would call the police if I needed to protect myself. Those words seemed to hit him harder than anything else I had said. He sank back onto the sofa with his head in his hands, sobbing silently. John worked for another hour. He changed 3 locks in total and gave me a complete set of new keys. He also offered to install additional security locks, but I declined. I had already spent enough money for today. Mr. Richard, if you need to change the locks again or have any security problem, do not hesitate to call me, John said as he finished packing his tools. He gave me his card and a compassionate look that suggested he had understood more of the situation than I would have liked. I paid him in cash money I had saved for emergencies. I never imagined an emergency would be protecting myself from my own son. After John left, I turned to Daniel and Jessica. It is time for you to go. Daniel stood up slowly like a man walking toward his execution. Dad, can I at least give you a hug? Can I at least say goodbye properly? I looked at my son, the child I had raised, the baby I had held in my arms, the teenager I had helped with homework, the young man I had watched marry with hope and love, and I felt nothing, a void where unconditional love used to be. No, I said simply, right now I cannot bear for you to touch me. I saw the pain in his eyes, and a small, cruel part of me rejoiced. I wanted him to feel even a fraction of the pain I was feeling. I understand, Daniel whispered. Dad, I am sorry, I am so sorry for all of this. I know these words mean nothing now, but I say them anyway. You are right, I said with a hollow voice. They mean nothing. Jessica said nothing. She simply took her purse and walked toward the door. Daniel followed her, after one last look toward me, a look full of regret and desperation. Remember, I said before they left, you have a month, 1 month to get the money and return what you stole. Otherwise, I go to the police with everything. We will get it, Daniel promised, although his voice lacked conviction. And then they left. I heard the sound of footsteps walking away, the engine of the moving truck starting, the vehicle driving away down the street. And then for the first time all day there was silence. Frank closed the door and engaged the new lock. The sound was definitive, final. Richard, Frank said softly, coming to sit beside me. Are you okay? No, I admitted. And finally, I allowed the tears to flow freely. I am not okay at all. Frank hugged me while I cried. I cried for the lost innocence, for the broken trust, for the relationship that maybe could never be repaired. I cried for the son I thought I had and for the man he had actually become. I cried for Emily, wishing she were here, wishing she could tell me what to do. Let it out, Frank murmured, patting my back like a father would. Cry all you need. You have earned it. I do not know how long we were like that. The sun had set completely when I finally separated from him. My eyes were swollen and my throat was sore from sobbing. Thank you, I whispered, drinking the water slowly. Thank you for being here. I do not know what I would have done without you. You do not have to thank me, Frank replied firmly. That is what friends do. Real friends. That word, real, echoed in my mind. True friends, true family. What did those words really mean? I had thought family was sacred, that blood was thicker than water, that a son would always be a son. But today had taught me that family could betray you as deeply as any stranger. Maybe more deeply because you trusted them in a way you would never trust anyone else. You need to eat something, Frank said, getting up from the sofa. I bet you have not eaten anything all day. He was right. My last meal had been breakfast that morning a whole lifetime ago. But the idea of eating turned my stomach. I am not hungry, I protested weakly. I do not care. Frank was already in the kitchen opening the refrigerator. You are going to eat even if I have to shove it in your mouth myself. You have had a tremendous shock and you need to keep up your strength. He made a simple sandwich for me and heated up some soup he found in the pantry. He forced me to eat while he sat across from me watching me like a hawk. Every bite was hard to swallow, but I did it because I knew he was right. I needed to keep my strength for what was coming next. What is the plan now? Frank asked when I finished eating. Tomorrow I am going to see my lawyer, I said, having thought about this for the last few minutes. I need to revoke that power of attorney immediately. Then I need to make a complete inventory of everything that was stolen and estimate the real value. Can I help you with that? Frank offered. I have a good memory for details. I remember many of the things you had. Thank you, I said, feeling a wave of gratitude for this man who had shown up without asking questions, who had stayed by my side throughout this horrible day. I also need to decide if I am really going to press charges if they cannot pay me. Do you have doubts? Frank asked, surprised. It is my son, Frank, I sighed. I know what he did. I know he has no excuse, but he is still my son. How do I send my own son to jail? You would not be sending him, Frank replied gently but firmly. He sent himself with his actions. You are just protecting your rights, your property, your safety. I know that in my head, I admitted. But my heart says he is my baby, the child I raised, that I fed, that I took care of when he was sick. That child grew up, Richard, Frank said softly. And the man he became made decisions that have consequences. You cannot protect him from the consequences of his own actions forever, Richard. Sometimes love means letting people face what they have done. His words made sense, but that did not make them easier to accept. Frank stayed with me until very late that night. We went through every room of the house together, taking notes on what had been returned and what was still missing. The list of lost items was devastating. Emily's jewelry valued at least $5,000. My antique watches, which had been appraised at $3,000 a few years ago. My grandmother's crystal collection, irreplaceable, but probably worth around $2,000. And the locket. My precious locket, which was priceless to me, but they had sold for a measly $200. They are looking at a debt of at least $15,000. Frank calculated, reviewing our notes. And that is being conservative with the estimates. Some of these things could be worth much more. They will never have that money, I said with certainty. They already said they have debts of $15,000. How are they going to get another $15,000 in a month? Then you go to the police. Frank said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Then I go to the police, I repeated, testing the words in my mouth. They were strange, wrong, as if I were speaking in a foreign language. That night after Frank finally went home, I stayed awake for hours. The house seemed different. Every creak made me jump. Every shadow seemed threatening. This place that had been my sanctuary for decades now seemed like a violated and unsafe space. I got up and checked all the locks 3 times, then 4 times, then 5. I knew it was irrational, that the locks were new and safe, that Daniel and Jessica no longer had the keys. But I could not stop. The fear had settled in my bones in a way I could not shake. Finally, around 3 a.m., I fell asleep on the sofa with all the lights on, unable to bear the idea of sleeping in my bedroom, where much of the confrontation had taken place. I woke up with the sun coming through the windows, and my body aching from sleeping in an uncomfortable position. For a blessed moment, I did not remember anything. Then everything came back at once, like a cold wave, and I had to breathe deeply several times not to start crying again. I forced myself to get up, to make coffee, to follow a normal routine, although nothing was normal. I called my lawyer, Mr. Miller, as soon as he opened his office at 9 a.m. "Mr. Richard Miller, what a surprise," he said, with his friendliest and most professional voice. "How can I help you?" "I need an urgent consultation," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need to revoke a power of attorney and possibly discuss filing criminal charges." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Criminal charges? Is everything okay?" "No," I admitted. "Nothing is okay, but I prefer to discuss it in person. I can see you this afternoon at 2. Does that work for you?" "Perfect," I agreed. "I will be there." I passed the next few hours preparing for the meeting. I organized all my notes. The recording of the confrontation with Daniel and Jessica. The photos I had taken of the moving truck and the objects being returned. Frank was right about being meticulous with documentation. If this was going to end with the police, I needed solid evidence. At 1 o'clock, I dressed in my best suit, one that Emily always said made me look powerful and elegant. I needed to feel powerful today. I needed to feel that I still had control over something in my life. Mr. Miller's office was downtown in an old but well-maintained building. I had known him for years. He had handled the sale of our first house. He had helped with Emily's will. He had been a constant presence in the important legal moments of my life. His secretary showed me in immediately. Miller got up from his desk when I entered, and his worried expression told me that something in my appearance revealed the trauma I had experienced. "Mr. Richard, please take a seat," he said, pointing to a comfortable chair in front of his desk. Are you okay?" "I am not okay," I said honestly, sitting down. "I am not okay, but I need your help to solve this." And then I told him everything, every painful detail of that horrible day. Miller listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes, his expression becoming more serious with every revelation. "This is serious, Mr. Richard," he said when I finished. "Very serious. We are talking about theft, possible forgery of documents, conspiracy. Your son could face years in prison." "I know," I whispered. "That is why I am so devastated." "I understand your conflict," Miller said with compassion. "He is your son, but you also need to protect yourself. First, let us revoke that power of attorney immediately. I can prepare the documents today." "Thank you," I said with relief. "Second, we need to decide on the criminal charges," he continued. "You have solid evidence, the recording, the testimony of your neighbor. The facts are clear, but once you press charges, there is no turning back. The legal process will run its course." I gave them a month, I explained. 1 month to return the value of what they stole. Miller nodded thoughtfully, clasping his hands on his desk. 1 month is reasonable considering the circumstances, but we need to formalize this. It cannot just be a verbal agreement. We need a legal document that clearly establishes the terms. "What kind of document?" I asked, relieved to have someone who knew how to handle this professionally. "I will prepare a restitution agreement," Miller explained. "In it we will detail every stolen object, its estimated value, and the total amount they must return. We will also include a specific deadline, 30 days from signing, and the consequences if they do not comply, which would be the immediate filing of criminal charges." "Would they have to sign it?" I asked. "Yes," he confirmed. "And would we need them to do it in front of a notary? That makes it legally binding. If they do not sign well, that in itself would be an admission that they know they did something wrong and are not willing to amend it." "And if they sign but do not pay?" My voice trembled slightly. "Then you have a legal document proving they admitted to the theft and agreed to restitution," Miller said firmly. "That makes filing a complaint much simpler. Basically, they would be condemning themselves." I nodded slowly, processing everything. "How long will it take you to prepare this document?" "I can have it ready tomorrow morning," he replied. "I will also include a clause prohibiting any unsolicited contact with you or entry to your property without your explicit written consent. Basically a civil restraining order." "Thank you, Gilberto," I said, feeling for the first time since yesterday that someone was on my side protecting me. I kept his name Gilberto in my head, but addressed him as Mr. Miller professionally. I do not know what I would do without your help. That is what I am here for, he replied with a kind smile. Now let us talk about the power of attorney. Do you have the original document? I took the document out of my bag. I had kept it in my safe at home along with other important papers. Miller reviewed it carefully, frowning as he read. This power is quite broad, he commented with concern. More than it should be for a temporary post-surgery power. Who drafted this? A lawyer Daniel recommended. I admitted, feeling a new weight in my stomach. He said he was a friend of his, that he would give us a good price. Mr. Richard Miller looked at me seriously. This document gives your son authority over virtually all your financial and legal affairs. With this, theoretically, he could sell your house, empty your bank accounts, obtain loans in your name. Do you realize how dangerous this is? I felt like I had been hit. But the lawyer said it was standard, that it was what was necessary to handle my accounts while I recovered. He lied to you, Miller said bluntly. Either he was incompetent or he did it intentionally. I suspect it was the latter. Do you remember his name? I gave him the name and saw Miller's expression darken even more. I know that. Man, he said with disgust. He has had several complaints before the Bar Association. Put it this way, I would not be surprised if he intentionally collaborated with your son on this. Do you mean Daniel planned this 2 years ago? The magnitude of the betrayal continued to grow. It is possible, Miller said carefully. Or maybe he just wanted to have the option as a precaution. Either way, this power of attorney should have been revoked a long time ago. The fact that your son never suggested this is telling. I left Miller's office 2 hours later with a clear plan, but with an even heavier heart. The power of attorney would be officially revoked the next day. The restitution agreement would be ready in 48 hours. And if Daniel and Jessica did not comply, I would have everything needed to press charges that could send them to prison. When I got home, I found Frank waiting for me in his garden. He approached immediately when he saw me get out of the taxi. How was it? He asked with concern. It is under control, I replied wearily. Miller is preparing everything. But I discovered something worse, Frank. The power of attorney I gave Daniel 2 years ago was much broader than it should have been. Basically, it gave him complete control over my financial life. Frank paled. My God, Richard. That means he could have. Could he have sold my house without my knowledge? I finished the sentence for him. Could he have emptied my accounts? Could he have done anything? And the lawyer who drafted the document is known for working in gray areas of the law. Then Daniel planned this 2 years ago. Frank said what we were both thinking. Or at least he made sure he had the necessary tools when the time came. I nodded. That night I slept poorly again. Nightmares haunted me. I dreamed I came home and found it completely empty. I dreamed I opened my drawers, and everything had disappeared. I dreamed of Daniel's face, but it was that of a stranger, someone I had never really known. I woke up at 5 a.m., soaked in sweat with my heart racing. I could not go back to sleep. I got up, made coffee, and sat in the kitchen watching the sun rise through the window. My phone rang around 7. It was an unknown number. I hesitated before answering, but finally did. Dad, it was Daniel's voice, broken and desperate. Please do not hang up. I should have hung up. I should have ended the call immediately, but something in his voice stopped me. What do you want, Daniel? I asked with a tired voice. I need to talk to you, he said quickly, as if fearing I was going to hang up at any moment. Please just give me 5 minutes. 5 minutes to explain something. You already explained enough the other day, I replied coldly. No, I did not explain, he insisted. There are things I did not tell you. Things you need to know. More lies? I asked bitterly. No, the truth. The complete truth I should have told you months ago. I sighed deeply. Against my better judgment, against all the warnings in my head, I said, You have 5 minutes. Speak. I heard him breathe deeply on the other end of the line. I lost my job 8 months ago, not 3 months like I told you. 8 months ago I was fired due to company restructuring. My hand tightened on the phone. And why did you not tell me? Shame, he admitted, pure shame. You had always been so proud of me, of my career, of how well I was doing. I could not bear to tell you I had failed. Losing a job is not failing, Daniel, I said, feeling a mixture of frustration and pain. It is something that happens to people. You could have told me. I know now. His voice was trembling. But at that moment, I could only think about how I was going to disappoint you. So I lied. I told you everything was fine. That work was great. That we were fine financially. While you were sinking in debt, I said, beginning to understand the full picture. Yes, he confirmed. We used credit cards to maintain an appearance of normality, to pay rent, to buy food, so it seemed like everything was fine when I came to visit you. And then the debts grew so much you could not even make the minimum payments? And that was when Jessica started talking about you, said Daniel. About how you lived alone in that big house? About how you had all those old things that were worth money? At first I ignored it, but the debts kept growing. Collectors would not stop calling. We were about to be evicted. And then you decided your father was the easy solution? I finished for him. It was not like that he protested weakly. Or maybe it was? I do not know anymore, Dad. My head was so confused. I was so desperate. Jessica kept saying we would only take a few things. Things you would not notice immediately. Just enough to get out of the hole. And the locket? I asked, my voice breaking. Was that just getting out of the hole? Silence on the other end of the line then, with a barely audible voice. We needed to pay rent. We were going to be thrown out on the street that same day. The locket was the most valuable thing we could find quickly. Dad, I am so sorry. If I could turn back time. But you cannot, I interrupted him. You cannot turn back time, Daniel. You cannot undo what you did. You cannot give me back the trust you broke. I know, Daniel sobbed on the other end of the line. I know, and it is killing me. Every time I close my eyes, I see your face. That expression when you discovered us. I had never seen so much pain in your eyes, Dad, and knowing I caused that pain. Why did you call me Daniel? I asked, interrupting his monologue of self-pity. What is it that you really want? I want you to know that Jessica and I are separating, he said, and those words took me completely by surprise. What? That was all I could say. After we left your house the other day, we had the most horrible fight of our marriage, he explained. The worst. I told her we never should have done what we did, that it was unforgivable. She said I was weak, that I was pathetic for feeling guilty. She said you had more than you needed, and there was nothing wrong with taking what was rightfully ours. What was rightfully ours, I repeated with disbelief. Nothing in my house belonged to you, Daniel. Exactly what I told her, he continued. And she insisted we were family. That family shares everything, that your house practically should be ours too. That was when I realized something terrible, Dad. What? I asked. That she never really loved me. His voice broke completely. She loved me for what I could give her, for the security I provided, for future possibilities. And when I lost my job and could no longer maintain that image, she started looking for other ways to get what she wanted. And I was stupid and desperate enough to play her game. I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Part of me wanted to console my son, to tell him everything would be okay. But another part, the part that was still bleeding from betrayal, remained cold and distant. That does not excuse what you did, I finally said. Jessica may have suggested the idea, but you made the decision. You entered my house. You took my things. You sold your mother's locket. Those were your decisions, Daniel. Yours. You are right, he admitted. And I am going to make things right, Dad. I got a job yesterday. It is not a big deal, just a warehouse job night shift, but it pays well. And I also got a second job during the day at a gas station. Between the two jobs, I can earn around $3,000 a month. I did quick mental calculations. That was not enough to pay $15,000 in a month. I know, he said with frustration. I have been thinking about this non-stop. I am trying to sell my car. I could get around $4,000 for it, and I have some things I can sell. My computer, my guitar, anything of value. And Jessica? I asked. Is she contributing to this? She left, he said simply. She packed her bags last night and went to live with her sister. She said if I was stupid enough to ruin our lives for a selfish old man, then she did not want to be part of that. The phrase selfish old man hit me like a slap. That was how she saw me. That was probably how she had seen me for years, only I had been too blind to notice. So you are alone? I observed. Yes, he confirmed. But maybe that is what I need. Maybe I have needed to be alone for a long time to discover who I really am, without someone else telling me what to think or what to do. Daniel, I appreciate you calling me and telling me all this, I said carefully. But this does not change the situation. My lawyer is preparing a restitution agreement. You will have to sign it in front of a notary, and if you cannot pay the full amount in a month, I will have to press charges. I understand, he said with a resigned voice. And I accept it. Whatever you do, Dad, I accept it. I deserve whatever you decide to do. It is not about what you deserve, I replied, feeling the tiredness in every word. It is about protecting myself, about making sure this never happens again. It will never happen again, he promised vehemently. I swear on Mom's memory that I will never do something like this again. The mention of Emily went through me like a knife. Do not swear on your mother, I said with a trembling voice. Do not bring her name into this. She would be devastated if she knew what you did. I know, Daniel sobbed, and that is what hurts me the most, knowing I not only disappointed my father but also my mother's memory. We ended the call shortly after. There was not much else to say. Daniel promised to be available to sign the agreement when it was ready. I promised him nothing. I could not promise forgiveness. I could not promise a repaired relationship. I could only promise that I would think about everything he had said. 2 days later, Miller called me to say the agreement was ready. Daniel came to his office that afternoon looking gaunt and exhausted. He had dark circles under his eyes like he had not slept in days. He had lost weight. His clothes fit him loosely. "Hello, Dad," he said when he saw me. His voice was barely a whisper. "Daniel," I replied with a brief nod. Miller had us sit down and explain the terms of the agreement. Daniel listened in silence, nodding occasionally. When Miller finished, Daniel signed without asking questions, without trying to negotiate. His signature trembled slightly on the paper. "I understand I probably will not be able to pay everything in a month," he said after signing. "But I want you to know I am going to try with everything I have, and if I cannot, I will accept the consequences. I am not going to run. I am not going to hide. I will face what I did." I nodded, not trusting my voice to speak. Seeing him like that, so broken and defeated, broke my heart. Despite everything, he was still my son. That part would never change, no matter what he had done. The following weeks were the hardest of my life. Every day I woke up feeling the weight of the decision I would have to make. Daniel called me weekly to report his progress. He had sold his car for $4,000. He had sold his computer, his guitar, his television, everything of value he had. He had gotten a third job on weekends. He was working almost 80 hours a week, barely sleeping. "I have managed to gather $8,000, he informed me in the third week. "I know it is not enough, but I am trying, Dad. I promise you I am trying." Frank came to visit me every day. He brought food, forced me to go for walks, kept me sane. One afternoon while we drank tea in my living room, he asked me the question I had been avoiding. "What are you going to do when the month is up?" he asked directly. "I do not know," I admitted. "Honestly, I do not know, Frank. I see how hard he is working. I see he is truly sorry. But that does not change what he did." "No, it does not change it," Frank agreed. "But you have to decide what is more important to you, justice or family." "Why can I not have both?" I asked with frustration. "Maybe you can," Frank observed thoughtfully. "But probably not in the way you expect. Justice does not always come from courts, Richard. Sometimes it comes in other forms." His words gave me a lot to think about. I spent nights awake, struggling with my conscience. I thought about Emily, about what she would advise me to do. She had always been softer than me, more forgiving, but she had also been firm with boundaries and consequences. 1 week before the deadline expired, Daniel appeared at my door. He had called first, asking permission to visit me. When I opened the door, I almost did not recognize him. He had lost at least 30 pounds. His face was gaunt, with deep lines of fatigue and stress. "Come in," I said, making room for him. He entered cautiously, like a scared animal. He sat on the edge of the sofa with his hands clasped between his knees. "I have $10,000, he said without preamble. "I know it is not enough. I am short 5,000. I tried everything, Dad. I worked until I thought I was going to pass out. I sold everything I owned. I even tried to get a loan, but without a steady job and with my credit history ruined, no bank would give me anything." "Daniel," I began, but he raised his hand. "Let me finish, please," he pleaded. "I know the agreement says if I do not pay the full amount, you will press charges, and I understand that. I accept it. But before you do, I need to tell you something." "I am listening," I said softly. "These last 30 days have been the worst of my life," he began, his voice trembling. "But they have also been the most revealing. Working all these jobs, living with almost nothing, having time to think about what I did, about who I had become. I realized something, Dad." "What?" I asked. "I realized I had lost my way a long time ago," he continued, tears running down his face. "Mom died, and I did not know how to handle it. Instead of talking to you, instead of processing my pain, I simply buried it. I focused on work, on pretending everything was fine, on being what I thought I should be." I felt my own throat closing. We had not really talked about Emily's death, not in the way we should have. We had both suffered in silence, each trying to protect the other. "And then I met Jessica," he continued. "And she was so sure of herself, so determined. She made me feel like I could be strong again. But what I was really doing was letting someone else make decisions for me, letting someone else tell me who I should be." "Daniel, we all make mistakes in relationships," I said softly. "That does not justify." "I know," he interrupted me. "I am not trying to justify anything. I am just trying to explain how I got to the point where I thought stealing from my own father was an acceptable option. I had lost my moral compass, Dad. I had lost sight of who I really was." He wiped his tears with the back of his hand, a gesture so familiar from when he was a child that I felt a sharp pain in my chest. "These 30 days working non-stop, living with almost nothing, facing what I did was like waking up from a nightmare," he said. "And I realized something else. I realized what I regret most is not that you caught me. It is that I did this in the first place. It is that I betrayed everything you taught me about honesty and integrity. What do you expect me to do with this, Daniel?" I asked, my voice breaking. "What do you expect me to say?" "Nothing," he replied, surprising me. "I do not expect your forgiveness. I do not expect you to forget what I did. I just wanted you to know that these 30 days changed my life. They taught me who I never want to be again. And regardless of what you decide to do, whether to press charges or not, I am going to spend the rest of my life trying to be the man Dad would have wanted me to be." We sat in silence for a long moment. I could hear the wall clock, the same clock Emily and I had bought on our trip to Europe 25 years ago. Every tick-tock seemed to mark the weight of the decision I had to make. "Do you still have the $10,000? I finally asked. Daniel nodded, pulling a thick envelope from his jacket. "It is all here in cash, as the agreement specified." I took the envelope, feeling its weight in my hands. $10,000. 30 days of grueling work, of sacrifice, of facing consequences. It was not the full amount, but it was evidence of genuine effort. "I am going to keep this," I said, and saw his shoulders relax with relief. "But I am not going to press charges, not yet." "What?" His voice was full of cautious hope. "Listen to me carefully, Daniel," I said firmly. "I am not forgiving what you did. I am not saying it is okay. I am saying I see your effort. I see your genuine regret, and I believe sending you to jail will not fix our relationship nor return what I lost." "Then what?" he began to ask. "The remaining $5,000, I continued. "You are going to pay them with time." "With time?" he asked, confused. "Once a month," I explained, forming the idea as I spoke. "You will come to my house, help me with things I need, repairs, gardening, whatever, and we will talk. We will really talk, not just superficialities. We will talk about your mother, about your pain, about how to rebuild trust." I saw the surprise on his face. "Are you giving me another chance?" "I am giving you the chance to earn one I corrected. But understand this clearly, the locks stay changed. You will never have keys to this house again. If you want to visit me, you will call first. If I need help, I will call you. But you will never enter my house again without an invitation. Understood?" "Understood," he nodded vigorously. "Dad, I promise I will not disappoint you again." "That is what I hope," I said, feeling the weight of years falling from my shoulders. "Because this is your last chance, Daniel. If you ever betray my trust again in any way, there will be no more conversations. I will press charges immediately." "I will not do it," he promised. "I swear on Mom's memory, on everything that is sacred. I will not fail again." This time when he mentioned Emily, it did not hurt as much because I could see my wife approving this decision. She had always believed in second chances. She had always believed in redemption. But she had also believed in consequences and clear boundaries. Daniel stayed a little longer. We drank coffee together, something we had not done in months. The conversation was awkward, at first full of pauses and tense silences. But gradually we began to talk about real things. He talked about how hard it had been losing his mother, about how he felt he had to be strong for me when in reality he was devastated too. I spoke of my own loneliness, of how every day in this big house reminded me of what I had lost. "We should have had these conversations 5 years ago," I said finally. "Yes," Daniel agreed, "but I guess better late than never." When he left that night, I hugged him for the first time since the day of the confrontation. It was not like before. There was not that warmth and unconditional trust, but it was a start, a small step toward something that maybe with time and effort could heal. Frank came to visit me the next day, curious to know what I had decided. "I am not going to press charges," I told him, "at least not for now. Are you?" "Sure?" he asked, studying my face carefully. "No," I admitted. "Honestly, I am not sure of anything, but I am sure sending my son to jail will not return what I lost. It will not return Emily's locket. It will not return the trust. It will just add more pain to an already painful situation." "You are stronger than you think," Frank said, taking my hand. "And wiser." "I do not feel wise," I sighed. "I feel tired." "Forgiveness is tiring," Frank observed, "but resentment is more tiring. And resentment lasts longer." He was right, as always. In the weeks that followed, Daniel kept his word. He called before every visit. He came once a week to help with household chores. He fixed the garden fence that had been broken for months. He cleaned the gutters. He painted the guest room that had needed a fresh coat of paint for years. And we talked. We talked about Emily, about the good times and the hard times. We talked about his childhood, about the memories we shared. Slowly, very slowly, we began to rebuild something. It was not what we had before that was lost forever, but it was something new, something built on honesty and clear boundaries instead of assumptions and blind trust. Months later, while sitting in my living room on a quiet afternoon, I realized the house felt different. It no longer felt violated or unsafe. It felt like my home, but a home I now protected with greater care. The new locks were not just metal and mechanisms. They were symbols of healthy boundaries, of necessary protection. I thought about everything I had lost. Emily's jewelry, my watches, the precious locket. I would never get them back. That pain would remain forever. But I had also gained something. I had gained knowledge of my own strength. I had learned that love does not mean allowing yourself to be hurt. I had learned that forgiving does not mean forgetting or pretending nothing happened. I got up and walked to the front door, running my hand over the new lock. I remembered the words Frank had said months ago, words that now resonated with deep truth in my heart. "Not every closed door is resentment," I whispered to myself. "Some are protection." I closed my eyes and could feel Emily's presence around me in every corner of this house we built together, and I knew with a deep certainty that she would be proud of me. Not necessarily for forgiving our son, but for protecting myself first, for establishing boundaries, for knowing that true love includes respect, and that respect requires boundaries. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. It was the end of a day, but also the beginning of something new, a new way of living, maybe more cautious, but also more conscious, stronger, more mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. 3 years later, Daniel and I have a different relationship, but a solid one. He has never had keys to my house again, but he has not asked for them either. He has rebuilt his life slowly, found a steady job, moved into a small but decent apartment. He never remarried. Every month he keeps his promise. He comes, helps, we talk. Sometimes they are difficult conversations. Sometimes they are moments of genuine connection, but they are real, honest, built on a foundation of mutual respect and clear boundaries. Did you enjoy my story? Where are you watching us from? Let us connect in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks, so I can keep bringing more stories like this. I really appreciate your support. I look forward to your comments on the story. In the video, you can see 2 new life stories I highly recommend. There is much more on my channel. I look forward to your comments on the story. In the video, you can see 2 new life stories I highly recommend. There is much more on my channel. Do not forget to subscribe. Until the next life story, with love and respect.